I live in a very inactive modern lifestyle, right? I was thinking about it yesterday. I worked from home yesterday, and if I didn't want to yesterday, I mean, I probably didn't have to take more than 10 steps. I live in a small house. Like, I'd have to go to the bathroom. I'd have to go to the kitchen. I did have to get my kid from school, right? But I'm going to do that in a car. I could have my food delivered to me. I can order my groceries online. I mean, in order to live, I really do not need to move. I can do all of my work at my computer, take a few steps to my car, right? And then to a plane or a train or however I'm going to commute. I sit and I can watch my entertainment, right? So as humans, we don't need to move in order to contribute to society. But on the contrary, we're really, as animals, we're meant to move, right? We have this essential desire and need to move in order to thrive, right? We don't need it to survive, but we need it to thrive. Movement is actually biological for humans. And it's easy to see how it can vary across lifespans, right? I have a 9-year-old daughter, and she is always just jumping off the walls. And so she needs to move, and young kids need to move in order to have that developmental growth. But as we get older and we get into our elderly years, there's less need to move, but it still helps us to thrive. And what's interesting is when we lack movement, this can result in tension building up in our bodies. And some of this tension has to do with our lymphatic system. Our lymphatic system is a secondary circulatory system, and it actually complements our circulatory system. But it's quite varied from our circulatory system in the fact that our circulatory system has a pump in the heart, right? And that pump helps to push blood throughout the vessels and brings it back. Well, the lymphatic system doesn't have this. So what happens is our circulatory system, right, helps to push blood out and provides nutrients to all of the cells in our bodies, right? That's how it's diffused. And it's diffused via fluid. But that fluid needs to somehow get back into the circulatory system again and get recycled. And that's where your lymphatic system comes into play. Your lymphatic system is able then to pick up that fluid, that interstitial fluid, and bring it back into the circulatory system. But again, it doesn't have a pump like the circulatory system, and it has to work against gravity in order to do this. Now, our lymphatic vessels do have some muscles that provide peristalsis. And peristalsis is just a mild muscle contraction that helps to get things moved. You probably are familiar with peristalsis as we talk about our esophagus, right? That helps to bring food down. So even if we're laying down, we can still move food into our stomach. So there is some of that, but our lymphatic system really relies on muscular contraction to provide the big pumping or the big movement of the fluid back towards the subclavial vein, and that's where it gets deposited in, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So if our muscles aren't contracting, then we're not going to be able to efficiently pump, and obviously we know that we just talked about the fact that we're not really active anymore, and not as much as before. So this is why this becomes increasingly important. And like I said, it has to work against gravity. So underneath your clavicle is where your lymph gets deposited back into your circulatory system. And this is really, really cool. The reason why it does it there is because that is in the circulatory system, that is the furthest, technically it is the furthest away from the heart's pump itself. So this is where we have our lowest blood pressure, and that's what allows the lymphatic system to deposit it back in. But again, that's so much when we look at where the lymph system is, all of this has to contract against or gravity. And so we can see how this is a very, very tall feat for us. Taller for some people than others. And what we also know is that lymphatic function decreases with age. There's been research that illustrates that there is a decrease in the density of lymphatic vessels and the branching of lymphatic vessels. And it's easy to see how if there's less vessels and they're thinner, that you're going to have a less ability to pick up this interstitial fluid and bring it back. And additionally, that peristalsis begins to decrease also with age. And so all of this is working against us as we begin to get older and older. Plus, as we get older, we move less. Oops. There we go. So what we were interested in researching is there a way to kind of optimize the slowing of the function? And we came up with a technology, a wellness optimizing technology that has a couple of key features. One is this unique footprint. So just the way that it's positioned, and the purpose of this is to provide some massaging benefit, right, to kind of help push the fluids back. And the other is to have a microcurrent. And we also developed the microcurrent to be a continuous comfort control microcurrent, and we'll talk about the benefits of that in just one moment. So if we're going to have a microcurrent, though, then we need to have a conductive medium. So in our research, we looked at different conductive mediums. We looked at a conductive medium that might be just inert gel. So it really doesn't have anything to it. All it does is really conduct the current. But then we also were curious as well, what would happen if we were to formulate topicals that have key ingredients or have ingredients that also can have benefits to the functioning of wellness and beauty. And so that's one of the things we looked at also, just to see how those might differ and have different impacts. So one of the ingredients that we looked at is an ingredient called Crythum meritum extract. And this ingredient was selected because there was some research that indicated that it had the ability to stimulate the production of beta endorphins in the human keratinocytes. So if you're starting to think, and the things are probably beginning to ping in your brain just a little bit, beta endorphins are one of the feel-good chemicals that our body uses. So we get that endorphin rush, right, when we're doing something pleasurable. So we picked this ingredient because this can release these beta endorphins from the skin cells themselves. And you can see that there is a 2.5 increase in this release in the keratinocytes with the Crythum meritum versus without the Crythum meritum. We also looked at an ingredient called Lotus corniculatus flower extract. In vitro, this ingredient has been shown to increase the adiponectin that is released by adipocytes. And adiponectin is important because there's been some research that shows that adiponectin can promote lymph vessel formation. And we just talked about with age that we have less branching and a decrease in lymph vessels. And so this might have the ability to counteract some of that. And the last ingredient that took our interest was this green tea blend. And this green tea blend was identified to have an impact on adipocytes, again, in vitro versus lipolysis assays. So this ingredient, we looked at it in different blends, and we found that that when we included green tea with different combinations of ingredients, that there was a greater average glycerol release. And when you're releasing more glycerol from your adipocytes, then you are decreasing the amount of lipids that are able to accumulate. And of course, this is a benefit. And we did some additional research on this ingredient also, and we found that it had some benefits to gene expression in these adipocytes too, and again, making it so that we're less likely to hold on to lipids within the body. And so that's why we looked at these ingredients and incorporating them into this conductive medium. So back to the microcurrent. So the microcurrent actually pulses 10 times positive and 10 times negative. So it is charge balanced. And part of the benefit of having a charge balance is that there's less sensitivity associated with that. And one of the things that we really wanted to do or look at with this microcurrent technology is to minimize any negative sensations that might be involved with it. When the body feels pain, that's your body telling you that something is not right. And so we were really trying to minimize that, but still provide the benefits of the microcurrent and provide it at a high intensity, or as high of a intensity that we can, without compromising sensitivity. So it pulses 10 times positive, 10 times negative, and it just continues on in this cycle. And the pulsing is important because the pulsing in and of itself can cause a physical vibration within the skin. And this physical vibration can stimulate nitric oxide, and nitric oxide causes vasodilation. So again, it causes now the microcirculation to get bigger, and again, that increases the movement of fluids. And this has been known via research, but we also looked at this specific current in gene expression on human skin, and we identified that this very specific microcurrent does indeed target the genes in the nitric oxide pathway, which would increase the vasodilation and can drive microcirculation. Now, when we talk about continuous comfort control, like I said, we're trying to minimize that sensation. So let's say that at this area of this calf, the skin is conductive enough that it can handle a microcurrent intensity, let's just call this of 3. Right? But if I were to move down here, it would be able to take a microcurrent intensity of 6. Now, if we were to jump from 3 to 6, that's actually those jumps is what causes the sensations and maybe the prickling feeling that we sometimes get associated with microcurrents. So if we can slowly ramp up between the 3 to the 6, then we minimize those sensations. And that's really what continuous comfort control is all about, is it slowly ramps up between these two different intensities based off the skin's conductivity to provide that optimized current. And as I said, a higher current is the benefit. And we know this because we've looked at different in vitro testing that illustrates that there are 2 ways to increase ingredient penetration via the skin. One is treatment time, which is limited, and the second is current intensity, which we have a little bit more leeway with. So we are looking to provide the highest current intensity without compromising skin sensitivity, and that's really the goal of continuous comfort control. And you can see here, this is a tape strip evaluation. So with tape stripping, what happens is the product, and with this, they'll use the product and the microcurrent on different areas of the skin. And then we made sure it was all absorbed or it's wiped off. And then you take tape strips and you put it on the skin and you rip them off so that it has the skin cells in it. And then you can analyze those skin cells for your marker ingredient. And so here we looked at at tape strip number 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. And so 9 would be the deepest and 1 would be the most superficial. And you can see that this biphasic pulsing microcurrent does have the ability to deliver key ingredients to the skin down to this 9th. And you don't go much past 10, because once you get past 10, then you're past the epidermis and you're into the dermis, and that's when people start bleeding and it becomes a little bit of an issue, right? And so this is really cool because it does show that even though we're having this pulsing direct current, we're still getting that ingredient penetration that we're looking for. So there's 2 mechanisms of action that I've just gone through. One is massage, and massage again just kind of pushes, and it has the interstitial fluid, and the other is the microcurrent, right? And you can see how these 2 technologies are going to work together to help with this overall movement of fluid, which is what we're trying to target as we're looking at wellness. And the reason that we're doing this is, again, we're looking to return balance. So if we stimulate lymphatic movement, this can boost detoxification for improved feelings. It can energize and invigorate the microcirculation. It enhances the movement of fluid, reducing areas of puffing or puffiness. And obviously, if we're massaging, right, that has the ability to calm the body and then also nourish the body for overall improved skin appearance. And all of this is related to this overarching wellness that we're trying to get at, or that we're trying to research. Another thing to keep in mind is that there is a connection between lymphatic and cellulite. So when we think about cellulite, right, cellulite is kind of that pillowed or mattress appearance or the dimpling that can happen in the skin. And while some of that is known to be fat, there's also the fact that there is additional fluid being accumulated there, because even individuals who are relatively thin can experience cellulite. Cellulite is not a fat issue. It's an overarching issue, and part of that has to do with lymphostasis. And lymphostasis is different from lymphedema. Lymphedema is an exaggerated collection of lymphatic fluid. Lymphostasis just means that you have a stagnation of this, and that's getting caught within the structure of the dermis and is being exaggerated with the cellulite, and that can cause some puffiness at the same time. But when the lymphatic movement is improved, we see that there's usually an improvement in the reduction of the puffiness or the circumference, but also a reduction in the overall appearance of cellulite. It becomes less dimpled and smoother at the surface. And this is a great quote from Dr. Zoe Drelos, who is a dermatologist, and she talks about how fluid can accumulate in the body, especially in the arms and the legs. And I'm sure many of us have experienced this where we're traveling on a long flight, or even if it's one of those days where we're like sitting in meetings all day, right? And we start to get this pooling of fluid while we're sitting or while we're standing. And this accumulates primarily in the legs, but it can also happen in the arms and other extremities. And this can cause an increase in thigh circumference or an ankle circumference, right? And any activity that encourages this extracellular fluid to re-enter the circulation, like again, via the lymphatic system, can decrease thigh diameter. And that's one of the goals of what we were researching. And what we found is that when we look at this technology and we paired it with the inert gel, we had the ability to decrease the reduction of arm and thigh circumference in as early as 2 weeks. And then in another study, we looked at volumetric reduction, which is very closely related to circumference. It just uses a slightly different device in order to measure it. So Primos is a 3D device. And in this evaluations, subjects who were prone to swelling in the calves were recruited, and their thighs, the volume of their thighs was taken via the Primos at baseline, after one use, and at 4 weeks. And what they found is after a single use of this technology, and this time we're looking at the technology in topical number 1 that we were talking about before, which means it has some additional ingredients in it. And we found that there was a 5.5% reduction in the mean of the volume of the thighs, and that reduction was seen in 91% of the subjects. And so that was done on site immediately after the first use. And there was a 7.4% reduction in the volume after 4 weeks, and that was seen in 82% of the subjects. And what's important to understand about the week 4 of the measurement is that the individuals did not use the technology on site. It had been used either earlier that day or potentially even the day before. And so we are able to have an impact on the volume or the circumference of these extremities through this technology. And again, we've alluded to that is related to the lymphatics and the movement of fluids. And we also looked at the reduction of cellulite, again, because we know that it's related to lymphatics. And in this study, individuals use the technology, and again, topical number 1, which has some additional ingredients in it. And they were evaluated by clinical grader for overall improvement in the appearance of their cellulite. And the clinical grader noted a 28% reduction in the number of depressions and a 30% reduction in the depth of those depressions at the end of 12 weeks. And those were noted in the vast majority of the subjects. Now, the subjects themselves, who are not clinical graders, right? So just your lay individuals, they also were able to see these improvements within their skin or within their body. 100% of the subjects noted that their skin looked less puffy or bloated at the end of the 12 weeks, and that their thigh or their arms looked slimmer, 97%. What I think is really interesting, and these were all women who had mild to moderate cellulite, mind you, is that the technology helped to smooth the appearance of dimpled or orange peel-looking skin. 100% of the subjects agreed with this. And they actually agreed with this not only at week 12, but at week 4 and also at week 2. And so you're seeing, so they're picking up on some very fast improvements in these wellness benefits. And this is another way to look at it. We're looking at thermal imaging. And what we know is that when the appearance of cellulite is decreased or the skin is smoother, then you get an increase in this thermal temperature, right? And again, when we look at the data on the thighs specifically, 94% of the subjects at day 14 or week 2 had an increase of the skin temperature, and that increase was up to 5% average. At week 8, I apologize, I said week 12 before. I promise I can count. It's at week 8. 97% of the subjects had this improvement in skin temperature, and the average was 6%. So again, this is just showing that improvement in cellulite in different ways. Another benefit of microcurrent is that it can stimulate ATP. So I apologize, we're going to have to go back to your science class for just a moment. So ATP is developed in the mitochondria, and it's basically the energy that powers our cells, right? And research has shown that microcurrent between 100 and 500 microamps elicits an increase in ATP. So we looked at our technology and the waveform that it provides and the current that it provides. And we looked at, again, gene expression in cultures, and it was consistent with mitochondrial biogenesis. So again, this means that it is increasing the mitochondria, and mitochondria is how we get the ATP. So we're having this benefit too. And anytime we think about ATP and mitochondria, we're thinking about overall energy, and that, again, making it so that our cells are more efficient. In this evaluation, we looked at microcurrent and or massage and its impact on blood flow. So we looked at this using optimal coherence tomography, and we're looking at an angiograph image. So let me just kind of break this down for you. We're looking basically at a very specific branch of the circulation, right? And this was a pilot study. We had 3 female subjects. We were just kind of doing a first blush investigation to see if the current, to see if the massage and the massage with the current could have an impact on the vascular flow. And the brighter the veins or the arteries become, this indicates that there is more flow happening. So again, after a single use, this is baseline before anything has happened to it. So we just added some inert gel to it, and it got and we allowed it to kind of come up to skin temperature. And then we looked at it with just massage for 5 minutes. And we saw that there was an increase in that vascular flow. And then on another Another time we looked at it and we did the massage with the current for 5 minutes. And again, we're seeing even a greater increase in that vascular flow. So this really illustrated to us that the massage and the microcurrent are both having an impact on the vascular flow within this area. And this was done on the dorsal part of the upper thigh, so the back of the upper thigh. In another evaluation looking at microcirculation and nourishment, we used a SpectraCam technology. And a SpectraCam is a very special camera that can provide lighting and look at the changes in the oxygenation of the blood or of the skin via the skin surface and via the imaging. And what we're looking for is to see if there was an increase of exchange of nutrients to the cells. So what ideally we were looking for is that there would be a decrease in overall hemoglobin, a decrease in oxygenated hemoglobin, because this would indicate that there was an exchange to the cells, and therefore an increase in deoxygenated hemoglobin. And then when this happens, then there's more heat and consumption of oxygen and nutrients to the skin. And we did see this, and this was done again with the technology and topical too. And what we found is, again, is after a single use on the thigh, that there was about a 23% reduction in oxygen saturation. So again, that decrease in oxygen. There was about a 10% reduction in hemoglobin concentration, which means that there was about a 10% increase in deoxygenated hemoglobin. So this is all indicative of increased microcirculation and increased nutrient deposition to the skin, i.e. increased microcirculation. And the second part of this is we looked at the overall hydration in this area at the same time to see how that was impacted, because obviously hydration is impacted by this microcirculation. And we did find that there was a 185% increase in hydration on the thigh, again, after a single use with the technology and topical number 2. And this is just a fun little image. You can see that it starts off in this red and it comes up to this light blue. And here is just some real life images of, again, manifesting the benefits of nourishment and microcirculation. I do want to indicate that this is looking at 2 different frequencies and lengths of the technology being used, and additional topicals were also supplemented in this. But you can really see a visible improvement in the way that the skin looks throughout this 12 weeks where these different products were used. So this was, again, the technology and topical number 1, and then some additional topicals at the same time that complemented that technology. In this evaluation, we're looking at skin density to look at movement of fluids. So dermal ultrasound can look at the density of the skin. And what we were most interested in here is to see if we could push out or have less fluid caught. So if we look at baseline, right, you see a lot of black and not as much vibrant green. And the black would be indicative of more interstitial space or interstitial fluid. And we were hoping to be able to minimize that as we went throughout the 28 days. And when we jump over to day 28, you can see that it is much greener. And that is indicative, again, that there is more density and there's not as much black area in here. So there's not as much interstitial fluid or interstitial space. And this is what we were hoping to identify. And again, having the ability to kind of push out that excess fluid. In another study, we also found similar results using dermal ultrasound, where 100% of the subjects were graded for improvement, and there was about a 14% increase in the density of the skin as measured on the thigh. And again, both of these evaluations were using the technology and topical number 1. And last but not least, we were curious to see if, again, having the massage benefits and the microcurrent of this technology, if that had the ability to just provide a positive impact on the overall well-being of individuals. And after a single use, the product's technology, and this is using topical number 2, helped to support overall health and well-being. 91% of the users agreed with that statement, that they felt more energized after using the product system. 88% of the subjects agreed with that. Alleviated muscle pain after workout and helped increase mobility. 88% of the subjects, and helped to reduce muscle tension. Again, what we were talking about at the very beginning, 100% of the subjects agreed with this. And so this was really the culmination of it all, right? That individuals can have these improvements in the way that they're feeling and the way that their body feels. So we